Intro Algebra Lesson 2-1B. We were looking at different types of numbers and the integers, whole numbers, natural numbers, real numbers, rational numbers or irrational numbers. Today we look a little bit more at the types of numbers we might have or some other things we can use to describe some numbers. We have the concept of opposites. And an opposite is something where we would have 2 points that are the same distance from the origin, which we know the origin is 0, but they're on opposite sides of the origin. So the origin's in the middle and you might have 5 units to the right, which would be positive 5, and then the same distance away to the left would be 5 units to the left, negative 5. So 5 and negative 5 are opposites of each other because they're the same distance from 0, from the origin. Alright, we also have what we call absolute value. Now this one commonly gets mixed up with opposites. It does not mean opposite. It has to do with the distance that a number is from 0 on a number line. We draw the symbol as 2 bars on the side of a number. So for example, if you saw this and a 2, that would mean the absolute value of 2. And what it's asking is, how far from 0 is the number 2? Well, the answer, 2 units away from 0. It does not mean opposite. It's how far away from 0. The reason why people think opposite is because they'll see the absolute value of negative 2. Now, how far away is negative 2 from 0? It's also 2 units away. So because people see this become a positive 2, they think to themselves, oh, it must mean opposite. Well, it doesn't mean opposite here. The best way I can explain it is pretend as if, I'll move these down here. Pretend as if right here was the school. Alright? Right there's the school. And this is your house. And over here is your friend's house. Now, how many blocks are you from school? You're 2 blocks from school. How many blocks is your friend from school? Also 2 blocks from school. You wouldn't say your friend is negative 2 blocks from school. It's the distance. So the absolute value of 2, right here, is 2. The absolute value of negative 2, how far away is it? It's 2 units away. The distance it is from 0 is what you're actually looking at. Now, find the absolute value. So once again, we want to ask ourselves, every time we see absolute value, we must be careful. When you draw absolute value, you don't have to be absurd and draw this. You don't have to draw these really super long lines. That looks a little crazy. But you also have to be careful that you don't say absolute value of 2, because it looks an awful lot like 121. So make sure you're clear if you're dealing with absolute value. Now, the absolute value of negative 10. How many units away from 0 is negative 10? 10 units away. The answer for this is 10. That's how far away it is from 0. Someone's going to tell me that it means opposite. It does not mean opposite. It's how far away it is. How about the absolute value of 65? Well, that's going to be 65 units away from 0. Again, that did not mean opposite. It was how far away it is. What if you have a fraction? That's okay. It's still going to be that far from 0. That's the distance from 0. Use mental math to solve. Now, when we use mental math, we've got to try to decide, can we think of anything that would work for x that would make this true? So, this is saying that the absolute value of x, the absolute value of an unknown, is 8 distance away from 0. If I were to make a quick number line, just to kind of look at it, here's my number line. And I'm going to put some dash marks on here. Here's 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's negative 8. Well, if I had a dot right here, how far away is that from 0? 8 units. If I had a dot right here at negative 8, how far away is that from 0? 8 units, which means x can equal 8 and negative 8. Both of those work. Plug it in. The absolute value of 8 is 8. The absolute value of negative 8, also 8. They have the same answer. How about this one? the absolute value of x is equal to a -3. Now -3 would be right here. 1, 2, 3. That's how far now, but that's the answer. I can't really say that that's -3 units away. We don't have a situation where this works. We would say no solution. The reason? We cannot find the absolute value of something to come out to a negative. There's one exception if you look at the differences here. If you saw this, now that's different because the negative sign is outside. Most people think, well, if I just stick -3 in here, it'll work. But what's the absolute value of -3? 3. So then someone gets that opposite thing going again, and they go, oh, well, then maybe this is +3. Because then the opposite would be negative. No. How far away is 3 from 0? Also 3. There's no solution for this one. Over here, both 3 and -3 would work because you'd have to do the absolute value first and then make it the opposite. So just be careful. There is a difference between those. A couple more definitions. Velocity. Now that we know about absolute value, we have the idea of velocity. We usually talk about speed. We say, oh, a car is traveling at a certain speed. It's going 65 miles per hour. Velocity still has to do with speed, but it also talks about direction. If your velocity is positive, we know the object's traveling up, like a rocket. If we said that a rocket was traveling at 600 miles per hour velocity, then we would be saying, well, that positive 600 means it's going up. If they said that the velocity of the rocket was negative 600 miles per hour, then we know the rocket was going down. Speed, just plain old speed, not velocity, is the absolute value of the velocity. So if I said it was going 600 miles per hour for velocity, the absolute value of 600 miles per hour is still 600 miles per hour. So that doesn't matter whether it's going up or down, the rocket's traveling at 600 miles per hour. If it was going down at a velocity of negative 600 miles per hour, and I said, what's the speed? The absolute value of negative 600 is also 600, so it would be traveling at 600 miles per hour. And a counterexample, the idea of a counterexample is to disprove. So proof is when you find an example of something. A counterexample goes against that. One bad false example. So here's a scenario we would have. Say we have the opposite of a number is always negative. And somebody might think this is true because they would say, well, if I have 5, the opposite of that is -5. And if I have 7, the opposite of that is -7. And if I have 10, the opposite of that is -10. So they keep thinking that these are all examples where it works, and we're trying to find a counterexample. Well, what if the first number, what if the original number was negative? If the original number was -5, what's the opposite of that? Positive. So there you go. I just found a counterexample that makes this statement false. Not all statements will be true.